Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
I remember what got me into reading business books. I was probably 20 or 21, and I enjoyed school also. And but for whatever reason, didn't really get into reading business books in my teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
And we were at a trade show in Vermont. It was Marianne and I, so we were married, no kids. But I had hauled a horse barn up there and was working the show that weekend. And we had gotten there on a Thursday or something to set up, and the show didn't start until the next day. So we went to Barnes and Nobles and just kind of killing time, looking through books and stuff. Mm-hmm. And grabbed Good to Great by Jim Collins because I had heard, a little bit about him in the book and things. And so there it was. So just grabbed it off the bookshelf in Barnes and Nobles, sat down on the bench.
And I see it on the bookshelf behind you right there.
Yeah.
It is. Good to Great.
That's not the book from, no, it's not, unfortunately. But, and just read for a couple hours and just got sucked in, man. I could not put it down. Yeah. Just the concepts were fascinating. And then that's what started my love for reading nonfiction business books and self-help and self-improvement. And then I did go through a phase at some point then in the next 5 to 7 years where it got a little weird. I think I allowed it to get to a place that maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe it became a little bit of an idol. And so when you mentioned, reading self-improvement books and self-development books and personal growth and business nonfiction type books and things, taking care not to let it get out of whack. Keep it in its proper place.
As you're talking, it sort of reminded me of, I think where it gets out of whack is when we think we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, right? What Song of Solomon says, or not Song of Solomon, Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, I forget, talks about there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yes, Ecclesiastes, yes.
Ecclesiastes. Yep. And so I think that's an important, as we read these things, Jim Collins, it's not original with him. He's discovering principles that are timeless, right? And if they're not timeless, then it's probably going to get weird.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
if it's some kind of new idea that nobody's ever heard of before, maybe it's not solid, maybe it's not something you should be looking at. But if you look at, all the way back to Scripture, and, I'm just going to pick 3 points. You go Scripture, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, a lot of his other books, a lot of things match there, right? I think Jesus, in fact, there's a book out there, The Greatest Salesman Who Ever Lived. I think Jesus was the greatest salesman who ever lived, right? And it's not some kind of used car salesman tactic. It's true servant leadership. It's true servanthood, not subservient, as Dave Ramsey's obviously close by here. And I love, it's servant leadership is not subservient. It is servant leadership. You're serving from a position of authority or power, but it's all from service for the greater good. That's something that's great for the community, for the folks that you're serving, for your own family, right? And ultimately, for the kingdom, hopefully. I think those books that are not tying you into those timeless principles, it gets weird. And also those books that sort of lead you to a fundamental mindset that I can sort of pull myself up by my own bootstraps. The principles, and I think you would echo this, the principles that I've learned have just been applying. The pulling myself up by my own bootstraps is just simply getting out of my own daggum way, right? Putting aside my weird ideas, putting aside laziness or selfishness or pride or whatever it is, and just going and actually being willing to plug into the real stuff, right? And applying that, right? So we do have to do that, right? Jesus had 12 disciples. One did, one didn't, 11 did. So we do have to apply ourselves. There's the part we have to play, but these principles are much greater than me or you or Jim Collins or anybody else, right?
I totally
it's
agree.
Timeless.
I totally agree. And I think there's something in there that's a case for a creator too, because if you think about how, the thing is, I just don't know what to do with beauty if there's not a creator. How do you explain beauty if there's not a creator? And, the obvious ones are like the beauty of creation, because there's things in creation that are just not necessary for the ecosystem.
Right.
Like, you can pull out this caterpillar here or this fish that lives so deep in the ocean, we don't actually know what it's there for or really what it eats or what eats it. You know what I mean? Like, you can pull out a few things and you don't lose anything. There's things that are what seem to be there, and it's possible that there's things that they're there and we don't even know their meaning yet.
Right.
But there are things in creation. How do you explain away the beauty of creation without creator.
But math and science, right? How orderly it is and how predictable it is.
That's exactly where I was going. Is another thing I think we think about a lot less is the beauty of our natural laws. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think these books that can make such a big difference, ultimately they're going to tie back into principles in Scripture, because it's not just because the Scriptures are a really good book and happen to get a lot of things right. It's because actually, what does Proverbs say? It says something along the lines of, by wisdom God formed the earth. And so there's a sync for society. There's a way of doing things. There's a way you can plug into society and structure and creation that works.
Right.
And then there's a lot of ways that if you try to do that don't. Mm-hmm. And so these principles, the ones that stick and the ones that make a difference, are ultimately just tying back into like the rules of nature and creation and mm-hmm. how humans work. Science is a great example. Math is probably my favorite example, because like it or not, 2 + 2 = 4. You can fool around with it. You can try to change. It's not going to change. It doesn't matter how you talk about it. It just is. You can't change it.
That's right.
And so there's these rules that God has kind of created that govern things, and tying into like a way that things work with society or interpersonal mm-hmm. relationships. Like that stuff is not just kind of fluky, fly by night, weird. Like it actually is true.
And that ties into another one of Zig's things he talks about is that had a huge impact, and I would have probably been from that same 3-day seminar. But if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want, and that's back to servant service again, right? Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what Jesus did. Jesus came here because he wanted something, right? I mean, he died, and that's a big deal. But he did it because he wanted something. Mm-hmm. But he had to be unselfish to be able to get that.
Sure.
Instead of being power grabbing, money hungry, truly selfish, then you're not going to get it. So we talk about you may have heard the concept of the upside down kingdom, right? And so many laws are that way. If you truly think about it, this is my opinion, not original with me, but if you truly actually want to be selfish, right? At the end of the day, you want a really good life, you have to be unselfish. Mm-hmm. Sort of weird, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But if you don't care about being selfish, you just sort of as a concept think it's great, you can go out and be selfish, and you're not going to have you're not going to have anything. You're not going to have true joy and true happiness and all the rest of it. So it's sort of that upside down kind of thing. And then what's weird is just how it all ties together. So if you get in a plane to go deliver water to a disaster zone, right? Drinking water, for example, the disaster zone, you're doing good and investing in others. That's great. But while that one law that you're actually carrying out the mission, there's a million others. There's gravity working for you, right? Mm-hmm. There's Bernoulli's principles, all these different principles that just make flight possible for you to be able to take off, and then you pull back the power and gravity pulls you down. Without gravity, you could never go give the water to anybody.
Right.
And so it blows my mind sometimes, especially when I'm flying, just to think about what's the core principle, can't even really call it the core principle, right? We have those as organizations and as humans, but what's that core to like God's creation principle, right?
Yes.
What do you call that? The timeless principle, or what are those principles that we're living out in one particular act that we're doing? All the things that have to work together, all those principles that without one of them, it wouldn't work.
Yes, totally.
Absolutely.
That's, one of the things that stuck out to me the most when I was learning to fly back in, probably 2013.
I didn't know you would fly.
Yeah. It was right before we moved to Nashville. I was doing cross country solos. Okay. And then we moved to Nashville, and I haven't picked it up since. So I haven't flown since 2013, probably. Wow. But man, I really
need to go for a ride tomorrow.
That would be fun. I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. Yeah. But one of the things that really stood out to me was how you have to understand the laws that govern flight and be in accordance with them. Yeah. It's very matter of fact. You know what I mean? You can wish it was different. You can hope it was different. You can try to make it different. It's not going to be different. Mm-hmm. You have to understand speed, airspeed, all of these different things that it's just very matter of fact. If you know how it works and you operate in accordance with the principles, you're going to have a great flight. It's going to be very fun. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be safe, and it's going to be awesome. If you try to fudge a system, you die.
And the great thing I think about that is whether you understand it or not, it's going to be that way.
Exactly.
And then you can also, I'm sort of a practical person, and sometimes probably not fun to be around because of that. But if you just think about it, I mean, I know people in my life who just get absolutely enthralled with why gravity works. I don't really care, personally, right? I don't really care why gravity works. I just know that it is always going to work that way. And so then I have to behave in such a way that I put gravity on the good side of things, not the bad side, right? I can use it to land the plane. I can use it for, for skiing down a hill, which is fun. I can use it to go skydiving, which I haven't done. Or you can choose not to pay attention, even if you don't understand why gravity, which I really don't. I don't understand why gravity works that way. I mean, simply I do, but not really fundamentally or in detail. You can either choose to live by the principle or not live by the principle. And I think if we had to understand all the principles to be able to bring it all together, like the core of the principle and why it works that way, that'd be pretty complicated. So God made it in such a way where you don't even really have to understand it. You just have to understand X is X, Y is Y.